Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to Fahi Oiyvaru, a program sponsored and organized by the National Bureau of Statistics and the United Nations Population Fund in Maldives. And today we have a national dialogue on population and youth, as today's theme for the World Population Day is investing in teenage girls. And so we have quite a bit to talk about on the security, dignity, and opportunity that we would like to give young women in our country. And as it is the World Population Day, a day that's marked every year on 11 July, today comes to be a very important day for us. And amongst a lot of work that has been organized on this particular program, we are very happy to have two very distinguished guests with us. So let me first introduce Mr. Alain Sibenaler. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right.
Good evening.
He's a UNFPA country director. He's been on the chair for quite a while now, and he's the country director for Maldives, although he's stationed in Sri Lanka. He's a man who is into a lot of organizational behavior and organizational management, and his importance to this reflects on the fact that a lot of our programs require a lot of change. Our next guest here is Dr. John May. He's a demographer by profession. He's very important, has been doing a lot of important work for the World Bank and many other countries also. He's been the chief author of today's document called Maldives Population Dynamics, Policy Prospects for Human Growth and Opportunity. And I think he has a lot of work he has done to try and disaggregate some of the problems we have from a statistical point of view from the census data that we have. So with this, let me start having some dialogue. And let me ask Alain, how would we describe UNFPA's work in Maldives? And also maybe you could highlight something about the World Population Day to begin with.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, sir, for having us here tonight, and I'm delighted to have this dialogue with you on population, youth, and development. First and foremost, UNFPA globally, we are the population data agency ensuring that every pregnancy is wanted. Every young people live up to their potential. But I think what we really want to do in countries that are a little bit considered in the middle income country bracket is to put young people really at the center of development. And when we say young people, it's not only young people, but young people, to invest in young people so that we can really look after the elderly people and the increasingly older population as well. And that's what we do in Maldives, and that's what we do in many other middle-income countries. Now, World Population Day, as you mentioned, is celebrated every year on the 11th of July, and it really is a day where the international community draws attention to population issues. So this year's theme is investing in teenage girls, and I think it's a very important theme that resonates with a lot of countries, because a lot of teenage girls do not have the right to fulfill their potential, to fulfill their reproductive rights, their reproductive health needs, and hence end up becoming often pregnant, this against their will, but also end up becoming married under the age of 18. And hence we believe in the United Nations Population Fund that you take away a lot of someone's potential, not only at the individual level, but at the community level and at the country level as well, when you don't invest in young people's and in young girls, in teenage girls' rights and their rights to health and especially reproductive health.
Yes, I think a very noble goal indeed. We have half our population
That's
women,
correct.
and at the youth and young age, if we don't inculcate the values of productivity,
Exactly.
then that's going to be wasted resources. Thank you very much. Let me go on to Dr. May. I would like to introduce Dr. May, and I have already done so. But can you tell us something about the census and what your findings have been that you reflected in this book? I would like this session to be a discussion where our viewers are going to have some additional knowledge that they didn't have before, so that when they finish this program, they go away with a little more awareness of what's happening in our country.
Yes, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having us tonight. Maldives has a long tradition of census taking. The first census was taken in 1911 and has done census quite regularly. The last one was conducted in September 2014 and was done by the National Bureau of Statistics and has produced a lot of data and publications, which are all on the website of the NBS. So I would urge our listener to go to the website, because there are a lot of information there and many excellent reports. What happened in 2014, however, is that the census was done with a very strict de facto approach. That means that everybody in the Maldives was captured in the census, and that came
where they were.
Where they were, exactly. And that gave a population which was a bit larger than expected. Mm-hmm. So roughly we have 340,000 Maldivians in the Maldives, and we have about 67,000 people who are from other countries, mostly India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. And these people are mostly men, and they are working mostly, but not only, in the tourist industry. So that was one of the main findings in the census. What I did then, with the help of the National Bureau of Statistics, was to look at the policy implications of all these data.
What are the policy implications?
Well, I came to this country for the first time in January this year, and I was really astonished to see a country which had gone through a very smooth and fairly rapid demographic transition. That's when the birth rates and the death rates, which are very high but in balance, go down and reach a new equilibrium when the death rate and the crude birth rate is much lower. And so Maldives now has a fertility rate, that's an average number of children per woman, of about 2.5 children, which is quite low. Mm-hmm. I'm working in some countries where the average is 7.6 children per woman. This is, this country has done tremendously well on the demographic side of things. The economy has also been vibrant. The tourist economy has grown quite a bit. Maldives is a dream destination for many people around the world. And also the agriculture and the fisheries to some extent, and the service industry have also helped. And so at the same time that the country underwent through this demographic transformation, there was also an impressive economic growth of the country, and so the country became a middle-income country. So that's quite impressive. Now, this has some implications.
Yes,
because also, of course, if you decrease fertility, it's a good thing in a sense. It's give better health outcomes and better family health status for many people, but it brings also the aging.
That's
so
correct.
The country will age.
So, Dr. May, TFR is a very interesting concept for people to understand. But as you say, you had just a very few children now. Let's say 2.5, as you say. You can't have half a child, but okay. But it's gone very, very low. And that means we have to make special provisions for bringing them up healthy and ready for the market also, no?
Absolutely.
That's a very important part of it. So there I will take up this idea of healthier children also a little later, I think. But let me go back to Alan and say, so with these challenges, you have to, as you say, the idea of the demographic dividend, right? It's come through another transition also called the epidemiological transition. Because in Maldives we had a lot of communicable diseases in the past, and over very good health care that we've had and health promotion, all that, we have been able to reduce infant mortality and crew death rates and maternal mortality, all that into a very low level, which means the survival rate has increased tremendously. Our population now survives to about 70, 80 years now, 76 years I think is the average LEB. So with that, what do you think we can do to promote these policies? To include, as you say, one of the things that you want to do is to try and mainstream population development issues into development policies.
Exactly.
Right. So as an expert in this area, not as just the country director, but as an expert in the change process also. Can you
yes. Well, thank you for the question. I would like to build on what Dr. May just said, and that is the new challenges that are coming in a country like Maldives that has gone out of its demographic transition and really now is faced with an opportunity, which is the demographic bonus. So there are two aspects to this. The first is that you need to be investing in young people, and especially in a very rapidly changing working environment, so that young people, and especially young girls, have opportunities to have extremely high quality education and equal opportunities to high quality education. But the second thing is that you must invest into a new generation of, for example, new non-communicable diseases. With an older old population, that is what is happening. So the choice the policymaker needs to make is that you not only need to invest in the younger population so that it has, as you said, good access to quality health, good access to quality education, that leads to good employment. And that employment has to be the basis for the social protection for its older population. And that is exactly what is happening now in Maldives. So it is important that those dimensions, those demographic changes, these phenomena that occur everywhere in the world are taken into account by the policymaker. The first thing is that you bring population issues closer to the population, right? So that demography is not just in the hand of demographers, but it's actually a phenomenon that are taken into account by economists, by national planners, by financial experts that know exactly here is where the targets need to be made in terms of development planning and development budgeting. And then the second thing is that, yes, the policymaker needs to see that these policies are of high quality, that there is accountability by the policymakers, but that there is also rights-based equity of the implementation of these policies. And I think it's a very exciting time for Maldives, as Dr. May just illustrated, because it is a very popular tourist destination. It is extremely well looked upon in terms of environmental protection, addressing some of the global challenges on climate change and so forth. But it is equally important for us to ensure that young women and young people have equal access and very equitable rights to good education and to good health.
I think those two things are happening. I mean, I think our enrollment is parity, you know. We have all women, all girls go to school, just as boys do. And health services also are accessible. And we have all this, you know, the health insurance and all that, which makes it, sometimes they may overuse it, but the point is it's available now and accessible. So there. But then, as you said, the problems which are particularly peculiar to women, for instance, you know, the reproductive type of health concerns, you know, that may have its own. But unintentionally, I would say, you're right, we have to improve on those as far as health services are concerned. I think there's a lot of preventive services being given regular antenatal care and all that kind of stuff. But then you have the other things about STIs and things, as you say. But the point here is there is this in our society. You have the issue of our, cultural and religious sensibilities also. So in order to juggle these together, it requires a lot of dialogue, a lot of confident building, that these things will not undermine or conflict with the values that we have also. So those are, how do you say, I mean, I don't know with other Muslim countries, how do you deal with that?
Well, as you mentioned earlier on when you kindly introduced me, I value culture as a tremendously important aspect of human life, but I also value culture as a leverage to really fulfill potential. And so, notwithstanding that, I think it's important to bear in mind that, yes, as you said, Maldives has very good indicators globally speaking, nationally speaking, and I think what is equally important is that Maldives has also improved, for example, on a young girl that is, or a younger woman that is getting married, I think at the average age of 22,
Right.
and so the average age of the first pregnancy is 21 or between 21 and 22, and so that has decreased over the last years, and I think these are very important aspects to bear in mind. What is more sensitive, though, is that violence against women, violence against younger girls, is something that is not often talked about. It's a little bit of a taboo, and we do know it's happening. It happens in the home, it happens sometimes at work, it happens outside, and these are important issues that we are not losing track of those. Hence my comment on the quality and the accountability of implementation of good policies and of good laws. And yes, I fully agree with you that everything that we do and that we must do has to be culturally sensitive. And where we are sitting in Colombo and looking at Sri Lanka and Maldives, there is a very strong sense and a very strong importance of culture and of religion in these development models of these two countries. But the indicators are good. So what can you then export to other countries in terms of knowledge, in terms of good practices? I think that's something that is very important and also exciting to look at.
Yes, would you like to say something?
Yeah, excuse me, I would like to backtrack a little bit on the demographic dividend to try to explain it briefly what it is. It's a change in the age structure. So when fertility comes down, the number of active people is increasing, relatively speaking. So you have more adults in the working age. And now Maldives is in the situation where you have one active person for only half a dependent below age 15. So the country has entered what we call the demographic window of opportunity. Now the country...
So there's less dependency now.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
So that gives the people who are working an opportunity to invest more on the younger generation. And as the Dr. Sibenaler said, to really invest in quality education, in skills, etc., to actually prepare the country for the future. And the future will be inevitably aging, population aging. Therefore, the economy has to change to capture these demographic dividends in order, and this is called the first demographic dividend, in order to create more wealth, a surplus, an economic surplus, that then can be invested, can be saved, and then can lead to a second demographic dividend. So the prospects are quite important for the future of the country, because the country is transforming very rapidly.
Very much, yes.
It went through this demographic transition, as we discussed. It went through the epidemiologic transition. Now it's moving from communicable to non-communicable diseases. But there are also a lot of economic transformation taking place, including the expansion probably of the tourist industry. And therefore, to bring the labor force and to give the those skills, to impart those skills to the young people, is extremely important to prepare for the future. And so the country will be more ready, if you will, to face the demographic population aging, which is inevitable, because as soon as fertility comes down, you have a population aging.
Begins to happen.
Yeah.
Yes. But I mean, these are heavily laced with the need for policy interventions. Obviously, all these findings have to be translated into change policies. You know, I mean, I look at when you're talking, for instance, Alain, gender and this kind of programs are multi-dimensional, how do you say, multidisciplinary, essentially, because you need all kinds of disciplines involved in this.
Yeah,
and also it's multi-sectoral also.
Yes.
You really cannot have Ministry of Health or Ministry of Environment or, let's say, Ministry of Education alone.
Right.
I mean, these are your cultural, let's say, traditional partners. They themselves cannot do that. So you have a hard task in harnessing the other sectors also to come into it, trade and education, housing, you know, law enforcement, all these things. Now, I wonder how you have been able to manage that in Maldives, to come up with a program. I mean, UNFPA is typically, just like I work with the Health Ministry, for instance, you work on a health and environment program where only Health Ministry can do nothing. It has to have other sectors coming in.
Totally.
Yeah, so similar programs, which is, again, as it is, our programs are not well managed, sad to say. But that's because we have so many barriers, cultural, behavioral, managerial, logistics, so many things. But add on to that now we have another layer of intersectorality, which becomes a tremendous burden. But you have to be done.
Yes.
Have you discussed these, and what are the
Yes.
kinds of things you see
No.
from policymakers in Maldives?
Absolutely, yes. And what you're describing is not unusual. I think it's very normal in any administration, in a societal makeup that you have, or within the system, right? That you don't have certain parts of the system that are not in communication and in coordination and sometimes in coherence enough amongst each other. Now, and that is where population and development comes in, because it is not just about health. It is not just about gender or women's equality. It is not just about young people, but bringing all of this together in a way that the readability, the accessibility of information and of knowledge is easy for everyone to understand. And that's why I'm always almost apologetic when I'm sitting next to a demographer or statistician, is that we need to demystify the meaning of statistics and of demographic statistics, so that it becomes evidence-based, that is beyond statistics, so that data goes beyond statistics. And hence, I believe that what I would really like to put here on the table is that as we go into, you know, the implementation of this 2030 global agenda for sustainable development, right? Let us link the demographic dividend to the digital dividend, so that young people who are really savvy in terms of accessing social media and different forms of information communication technologies make use of that, so that there is more information, there's more knowledge, there is more sort of evidence about how young people, and I want to speak one word about the intergenerational dynamics, read about where the country is going, and hence using good data beyond statistics, but also, of course, statistics, to really inform the policymaker on what needs to be done. And this is what I would like to describe as a modern sort of type of economy, where the connectivity between the parts of the system is there, and it's recognized and it's used as a leverage to really maximize the system.
Right. I mean, what you talk about is also, if you're going to maximize this demographic dividend, you have to develop skills.
Absolutely.
Right? Now, that brings to question the kinds of educational programs we have also. We have a lot of academics in it, but the skills part may be not adequate. I think the government is, for instance, trying to do a new program, new curriculum, which has inclusion of skill I mean, it's an upshot beginning.
Right.
Right, but still, it'll take its time. But the point is that you don't want academics. You don't want people who are just white-collar jobs only. You need people who will be in all kinds of
Totally.
businesses.
Yes.
So that skill base has to be done. Now, again, that's also another major initiative that one could take with the education ministry.
I agree.
With them.
I agree with you, and I'd like to give you a direct answer to that. Is that we've started to work with the Ministry of Education to strengthen a module in the school curriculum of comprehensive reproductive health education, right? Which addresses the issues of reproductive health, but also of the rights of reproductive health and the respect vis-à-vis boys and girls and amongst them. And I think this is a different way of talking about gender-based violence or gender inequality, but really look at it in the form of life skills, right? What does it take a young person as you go through changes in your body and in your mind and within your environment to really be respectful with each other. So that's the first important thing. And the second thing that I keep on, and I want to take advantage of speaking publicly, I think in a lot of countries there is a recognized need to introduce multiple intelligence education in the curriculum, right? So emotional intelligence, social intelligence skills, cultural intelligence skills, moral intelligence. And I think these are some of the things that also inter alia come out of our findings, is that the education system doesn't have to be changed, but it has to be maybe tweaked a little bit so that some of these other aspects are fully taken into account.
Some of these methods can be changed.
Totally, yes. Yes.
I think that's an important point you make about the emotional intelligence aspects, where I think more and more you're looking at it's not knowledge alone, right?
No,
it's
exactly.
how you connect with other human beings.
Exactly.
Connectivity.
And connect things, right? And
that's
thinking.
Right. Yes. So success depends on how well you are connected with other human beings.
Exactly.
Not the knowledge that you have alone.
And that connectivity is not just digital, right? It's like social intelligence is not being social on social media, but it's about interaction and respect and recognizing others'
So the moral dimension comes in also.
Totally, exactly. And that takes us back to the cultural dimension, right? And cultural intelligence is to really not say it shouldn't be done this way in a Muslim country, it shouldn't be this way in a Christian country, but that you make good use of these values to really go into the progress of
you're looking at the intersection of
exactly.
Those, right? Dr. May, now I think I'd like to talk a little bit about the young people who are a reduction of the younger generation now as we move into low fertility, right?
Yeah.
Now, how do we deal with the health of these people? Now, it's for you both actually, because the NCD is a very, very. I want to focus on this because this becomes a very major aspect of concern for the future. What are NCDs? I mean, I'm in health, so I tend to think about it also. You're looking at heart disease, you're going to get diabetes, you look at vascular problems, right? Stressful situations where you become high blood pressure and things like that, and cancers. Now, all those have its risk factors in the way you behave now. I mean, we are developing, we're getting wealthier, and wealthier means you eat more, you exercise less, you smoke more, and you live in more stressful situations. Now, all these things are a part of our society. It becomes very important. If you're going to get that dividend really reaped, then you got to have this. So it becomes not a separate program, but it's an integrated program where these are a part of the whole.
It is not only the acquisition of skills and levels of education, plus the moral dimension and the emotional dimension, etc., but it's also the better health. And the better health comes with the change of behavior at the individual level. So the people have to be aware that smoking is not good for you, that some behavior through nutrition or whatever should be improved or should be changed. And I think there is a dimension of health communication to all this.
Right, right.
And but you are the specialist in public health.
I know.
I'm just a
well,
demographer.
thank you. But the thing is, it's a struggle. It's really a struggle. I deal with young people every day. I try to at least tell one young person every day, smoking is bad. Exercise a little more. I try to make it so that at least. But when you look at the number of people who are starting to smoke now in our society, right? And I mean, it's we are taken for a ride essentially. I mean, I say the cigarette companies are very, very shrewd in making the best adverts and making enticing young people to smoke. I mean, if you look at cigarettes, they say one WHO's Director General once said famously that it's the only item in the market when used exactly as it is specified will make you sick or kill you. So in a way, you're buying your own
You put
unhealth.
Margaret Chan?
No, before that.
Oh, before that, yeah.
That's right. Yeah, but then you're looking at all these eating out habits. You know, so many restaurants, nobody wants to cook at home now. So, and you go and see all the food there, and it's very easy. You don't want to prepare a, Black Forest cake at home, but you have Black Forest cake in the restaurant. You can eat any time you want. So you are eating all the calories, and you're on motorcycles. It's like a big shop all of Mali. So I'm trying to say it because this idea of having to reap the demographic dividend, which is very important, it's a very good point you make, but it requires a whole lot of doing. You have to say something to the policymakers on this.
Yes, I think that just to immediately respond to that, there are two aspects again to this, increase of non-communicable diseases in a society that is wealthier, but not necessarily healthier, right? And that is the economic cost. And the economic cost that it takes to cure, whether it is a cancer or whether it is a cardiovascular condition that you have from any of the life changes that you've just, or the life choices that you've just mentioned. So it's smoking, but it's also stress. It is diabetes, it is high cholesterol and obesity. And the other aspect is that the loss of economic productivity, again, because you are taking out of the job market not people who are having these diseases at the age of 75 or 80, but often in their 40s.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And I think so that's very important, and I agree with you. And Dr. May, I'm sure, has some experience in terms of now how is that linked into policy making, how is it linked into awareness raising, and I think it's important to really look at the economic costs and what it costs to not have a population that is healthy and health conscious, right, in terms of productivity.
Absolutely. Maybe the first step is for the people to be aware of these issues.
Very true.
Exactly.
And that's what we try to do in this booklet with the National Bureau of Statistics, is to explain things in a simple language that everybody can understand. And people can even download the publication on the UNFPA website. So
Right.
it's for free, it's there, it's a PDF, and people are very savvy here with the electronics and the communication tools.
Yes, I think that's a good point you make.
Yeah, and also I repeat myself, but the NBS website is it's quite impressive. A lot of publications, a lot of documents can be downloaded at just a click of a mouse.
Yeah, from what you say, you are a demographer and you are a researcher. So the other point about one of your main themes, one of the 4 ways to go ahead, is also advocacy and research, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So research which is not only just to mull over the figures from a census, but really do some specific research on questions like this.
Exactly.
About obesity, what about, you know, women's, and some WHO statistics say women over 40 in Maldives, I think 40% or 50% are obese. So looking at that, you're looking at, again, what kind of risks do they have? I mean, productivity is important, but as you say, they might be taken out of that group with some kind of a disease or disability. Then what do you do?
But what we need to do, I think, is to digest those data, then to try to communicate about them, which we try to do in this booklet, and then to try to increase the awareness of the leadership.
Right.
And it's not always easy because politicians are looking at the short term usually, and demographers are looking at the longer term. So sometimes it's a conflict between the two visions. You have.
So you make, as you said, you make projections, not injections. Huh?
Yeah, no, I am a fake doctor. I'm doing projections only. I don't do injections. But we look at the long-term perspective. The evolution we have seen in Maldives. Now, the result we see now has been in the making for about 30, 40 years. But we have to think about the next 40 years. What will happen? What's the future? What's the population aging? What's the issue of the non-communicable disease, etc., etc.? So we need to take these long-term perspective, but we need to translate that into short-term policy measures, and that's sometimes the difficulty, because the political life in any country is I mean the time frame is on a week basis, sometimes on a monthly basis, and we are looking at maybe 10, 20, 30 years in advance. So we have to find a way to bring the right policies right now, because there is some urgency as well, and to do so, and to do those policies that will have a good impact on the long-term impact. And that's a bit of an art. It's not a science.
Exactly.
You have to convince the leaders, and I have some experience with talking to head of states in other parts of the world, and it's always difficult. You have half an hour with the head of state, and you have to give the basic.
You just take a chart with you and then show it.
The basic concepts of demography, and some leaders understand extremely rapidly, and some others, are less.
They need to put it to their advisors.
Before they can. But to get back to this advocacy, to this dissemination, to these. There's also research and the teaching, and I think we are going to have this week some meetings with the National University of Maldives, and to really see with the specialists here what can be done to promote some of this knowledge. And I'm sometimes using an expression which occurs in many countries. I call it demographic illiteracy, because people don't know, they don't see the long-term implications and the perspective, and so you have to tell people and leaders one at a time, and to convince them that this is an important issue. And sometimes some leaders are really quick to respond, and some others are less rapid, of course. And so that has to be done in every country, and probably demography needs to be taught more consistently. And we have the same problem in the United States, where a lot of good departments of demography have disappeared in the recent decades, because there is no market for demographers, because the population issue has been resolved in most part of the world, except Africa, of course. And so there is a kind of a vicious circle. You don't teach demography, people know less about demography, and they don't realize the importance of it. So I think it's still important, I hope.
If I may just bounce back on this, I agree with what you say, but this is a tremendous opportunity. We see it in UNFPA as a great opportunity to really do business differently. And so whatever we have in terms of publication and knowledge and research is not just a one-off event that we would have, right? But what we would like to create is dialogues. Dialogues around issues that go beyond the statistics, that go beyond demography. What are the implications? How does a sociologist read it, who is an academic? How does an economist read it, who is more looking into costs and investment? And that is important, that we bring all of these forces together. But at the same time, let us not forget that we need to have an intergenerational dimension to it. Because it is, I mean, we're coming from developed countries where we see a lot of changes happening in societies and where different parts of the society do talk with each other. I do feel from my observations that we're a little bit in the United Nations going with buzzwords and going a little bit with what is the fashion of the moment. And so over the last years, I do believe that we've put a lot of emphasis of giving voice to young people. But I insist that as much as we give voice to young people, we do not forget the wisdom of the elderly. And bringing those two forces together is what we do at UNFPA. And so hence bringing data beyond statistics, good evidence, and reading that evidence in terms of human interest stories, in terms of anecdote, in terms of academic research, and translating it, as Dr. May said, into user-friendly implications is what is really important. And again, I also repeat that this digital dividend is as important as the demographic dividend, and hence linking these two is what we do at UNFPA.
So the older generation has to learn the digital also.
I believe they do.
I think there are lots, yeah. There are things on Facebook and all these things. But the point you're raising is very important, I see, as far as the young and the old.
Yes.
In Maldives, we have a phenomenon that's happened very quickly since the 1970s, where the extended family began to disappear very fast. And I don't have to talk about a long story, but it was the beginning of money in the hands of the younger people. You know, the fish sales right away to the trawlers gave them money at the end of the day. So the extended family started breaking down because now young people could live by themselves. We don't need the grandfather and father anymore to be supporting them. So there you see the divide happening, and you see grandparents in the islands, and so families, this has happened. And so you see the, as you say, intergenerational awareness also is very small, because ayahs or caretakers are looking after the children. The grandparents are not there to tell the stories of when they were young, what happened, and connect the children to the present moment.
Absolutely.
So all those, that what you're saying is very true. So these have to come about in the educational system also.
Yes.
Besides just programs for energizing this, but still. So there's again another challenge. But I see, otherwise, as you say, as the older generation increases, that feeling of wanting to take care of them and be supportive will not be also there, because you don't see that connection. I'm glad you raised that, because I wasn't thinking of talking about it, but it's a very important point.
Well, it's just the illustration that I always give, coming from Europe and living and working and living in a country like Sri Lanka. I always see, whether it's in the supermarket, the restaurants, or concerts, the three generations together, right? And this is something that we have much less in our societies, and that is an opportunity. I think it's an opportunity, and it depends on every country how they maximize that opportunity, that knowledge. On one hand, the creativity, the innovation from the young people, and on the other hand, the wisdom and the experience from the older generation. Bringing that together, I think that's a fascinating aspect.
I'm glad you brought that point up. It was completely out of my radar. to begin. Well, I think we are coming almost to the close. So on this dialogue on population youth on Fahi Oiyvaru, that means good tide.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope it's good tide. We've been talking about good stuff. What would you like to end our discussion on? Would you like to say something specific of today and what
Yes.
hopes you have for Maldives
Yes, absolutely.
as a country director?
Yes, no, I have a lot of hopes for
Please.
Maldives to show an example of progressive, very prospective foresight of its development. So it's not only about tourism, it's not only about economic growth, but it's about ecotourism, it's about inclusive economic growth, and I think that potential is there, and it has to be harnessed. So very importantly, to summarize, is that we use good data, we use evidence-based to inform good policies, and good policies, that means policies that are accountable, that are rights-based, equitable, and that are of high quality. And then the other thing is that this is just the beginning of a process of dialogue where we really want to have the insight of people like Dr. May, of yourselves, and of very distinguished people that have contributed to the society, bring those energies together in dialogue so that they see, aha, this is maybe some of the recommendations that need to be made to the policymaker, and do it in an intergenerational basis.
Right. Very important. Thank you very much, Dr.
You're
May.
most welcome.
You have done a great job on this, and I
Thank
think we have to ask you, when you go and meet the university people, to energize this process of really looking at data, even demography. I think it's a very interesting topic to learn about. There are new good methods, and it doesn't have to be about population explosion, but even in smaller degrees of degree, there's population problems. So demography does not necessarily have to be with exploding populations.
Yeah,
Right? And so, and
absolutely.
research and development and advocacy. I think that's a part where you can do a lot to help us with.
Yeah, and to develop the right policies and to especially implement them. The problem starts when you have a good policy, because you have to implement it.
Right. And of course do some basic research, not basic, sorry, how do you call it, operational research
Yeah,
on whether that policy has worked.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
That-
Because
that's a
there
good part
there
to
must
do.
be some monitoring and evaluation and
Yes,
assessment of the
yes.
policies. Absolutely, yeah.
Right. So I hope you have are able to make that point to our educators
I hope so.
when you meet them. I think that's very important. And our Census Bureau, and they must be ready for the next one, preparing already, and
Yeah.
so we can have additional indicators that we can look at, hopefully, from the things
Yeah.
that we have talked about, perhaps.
And I
Yes.
think there is also a demographic and health surveys being
Yes.
planned in Maldives
Yep.
Yes.
for next year, if I am correct.
This year it's
Or maybe the
supposed to
field
start-
work will
yeah.
start this week, and we will have the results
year.
in
Mm.
early 2017, and that will also bring
Give
a
us
lot of
additional
insight to
benefits,
the
yes.
demographic picture. So
Very good. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I think I can feel that the audience must have learned something, as I said
Thank
at
you,
the
Doctor.
beginning. I think,
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
having given this opportunity to talk to you, and good luck to you in your work
Thank
and
you very
in
much.
your help to Maldives. So we end here today, and I hope our listeners have been able to glean some benefit from what we have discussed. I think the issue of population dynamics is a very important one for Maldives, especially a small one where we have lots of increase in our population, not just natural but artificial, as how we have people coming from other countries to work for us. That too has its own bearing. We didn't touch on this too much, but migration is also a big issue in our population concerns. So with this, with thanks to our guests, let me say goodbye. Absattar Yusuf signing off. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.